Welcome, everybody, to the October 12th City Council meeting. Welcome to everyone here and at home. First thing up is the public forum. The public forum is an opportunity for anyone to come and speak to the City Council on any city-related issues, except for those items which have already been heard by a hearings official or are on tonight's agenda as a public hearing. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. When you come to the podium, please give your name, city of residence, and for Eugene residents, your ward if known. The timer and lights indicate the time you have to speak. The red light indicates the end of 3 minutes. And we have 19 people signed up. We'll start out with Wayne Martin, followed by Ed Moy.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, honored council people, and Mr. City Manager and others. As a retired pastor with a heart for the unhoused, I was most grateful to Pope Francis for his inspiring challenge to our congressional leaders and tens of millions of Americans throughout his visit. It's been a month now, so let's do a little review. Before Congress, the Pope emphasized the centrality of the Golden Rule as a mandate for the human family. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We would do well to use the Golden Rule to fit our civic life. Treat people who have no roof over their heads, nowhere to store their meager belongings, and no place to care for their own hygiene, as you would want to be treated if you were in their shoes or stockings. If we practiced the Golden Rule, we would find ourselves at odds with some of our legal codes here in Eugene. Some of these codes were instituted under very different circumstances than what we all face today. And they are codes that can be changed without grossly endangering our safety. And we would find ourselves in good company, others who have courageously questioned our laws. Moses, Jesus, Gandhi, Francis of Assisi, Lincoln, MLK Jr., Dorothy Day, Thomas Merton, the four that Pope Francis lifted up in his address. Each of them mustered their spiritual and moral resources against inequitable laws and sanctions that were punitive of disadvantaged and so-called expendable people. Long ago, a poet summed it up nicely. We should take his words very seriously. Listen. He wrote, "How can we be in alliance with leaders who legitimize mischief by statute?" Psalm 94. Good question. Some of us are planning a town meeting on homelessness for the coming weeks, probably mid-November. Stay tuned for details. Meanwhile, let's all expand the Golden Rule a little in our daily lives and in our civic life and in our attitudes. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Next up is Ed. And after him, excuse me, I'll get to the bottom here, is Bob Larson. Go ahead.
My name is Ed Moy. I live in Betty Taylor's ward, and thank you, Betty, for coming by and looking at what I've been talking about. I do appreciate your time. As a teenager, I fled the urban landscapes of my youth like toothpaste squeezed from a tube.
Could you speak into the microphone?
Yo,
Thank you.
Yo, yo, yo. I don't think this is plugged in.
That's the battery.
Yeah, it's on.
It's
It is?
on.
Okay. As a teenager, I fled the urban landscape of my youth like toothpaste squeezed from its tube by a ton of bricks. When I found myself returning to Eugene again and again, I decided to make this wonderful little city my home. Its small town feel suited me like finely tailored clothing. 40 years later, my wife and I have roots deep in our Eugene neighborhood. Fawns grow up playing in our yard. This year, red-shouldered hawks and woodpeckers nested in our tree. From our home, we can easily walk to the grocery store for fresh veggies or pass the edge of town and into the forest in a matter of minutes. I sincerely believe this is the best neighborhood in Eugene, so much better than the endless concrete of my childhood. With its walkability, its mix of housing, its quiet ambience, the city should be cultivating this as an example of a healthy neighborhood, not carpet bombing it with high-profit, high-rise monstrosities. The SWAZ plan was developed over a period of 2 years, with only 3 weeks at the very end of the process allowed for public comment. Doesn't it seem that the best way to plan for a neighborhood future is to start with public comment rather than tacking it on as a fig leaf afterthought? I've yet to hear a convincing reason why we should accept such a far-reaching plan with so little public oversight. I have yet to talk with anyone living in my neighborhood who thinks it's a good idea. I find myself asking, what is the rush all about? I understand the need to accommodate for infill, but I submit that over the last few years, my neighborhood has already accommodated a massive infill. I know of 3 neighbors who built small rental units on my street. There's also a cottage cluster development that was recently built on a couple of lots about a block from my house. And lastly, Cascade Manor's 2 recent multi-story massive condo developments have paved over literally acres of gardens and affordable single-family homes. Again, just 1 block from my house. Now city planners want to endorse a 7 or 8 story condo unit across the street from my house. I, however, think my neighborhood has already had its fill of infill. To forcibly transform Willamette into a congested concrete canyon in the name of livability is beyond ridiculous. It's criminal. I would suggest that people who endorse this type of high-rise density development should show us whiners how it's done by building one in their neighborhood. Let them proudly wave their magic wand and intone the magic words swaz and magically convince their neighbors that they're going to love living under the shadow of condo towers. Then they won't have to listen to my neighborhood complaining about forced urban nightmares, and you won't have to listen to me anymore. Sounds like a win-win to me.
Bob Larson is next, followed by, no clapping, please, Joyce Eaton.
I'm Bob Larson. I live on 30th. A few years ago, the state of Oregon put a moratorium on building of new retirement homes in the state. That lasted for several years. That industry had become aggressive in building new properties and had created severe financial problems for themselves and their residents. About 7 years ago, that moratorium was lifted and developers came back with a vengeance. Eugene has experienced an unprecedented growth in building of these new retirement homes since the end of the moratorium. We don't need any more built at this time. We have enough. Cascade Manor is in the process of completing their 3rd phase, with the 4th phase not far behind if the zoning gets completed and approved. This would double the units that they already have in place, and we already have clogged streets, no parking, and commercial vehicles going up our narrow street all the time. Please take this proposed zone change Please take this proposed zone change south of Willamette Avenue off this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Joyce Eaton is next, followed by Margie James.
Hi, I'm Joyce Eaton, and I'm talking for 2 different family houses.
Pull your mic close to you too, please. Just move it. Yep, so we can hear you.
Okay. Joyce Eaton, I'm talking for 2 different family houses in and near the South Willamette Special Area Zone. Both houses are owned and occupied by family members, one on 2311 Willamette Street in the friendly area neighbors, the non-college hillside, and another at 120 East 30th Avenue in Southeast Neighbors, which is the non-Cascade Manor side. Both addresses are represented by Betty Taylor from Ward 2. Both places did receive notice of the open house before the Planning Commission hearing, although because mail isn't delivered to the East 30th house, we only received the notification to the post office box. In August of 2013, I attended one of the stakeholder meetings. It was the long-term vision for South Willamette Street meeting on August 12, 2013. Why did I attend? I attended the meeting because we received a postcard that was sent to the 2311 Willamette Street house as a property owner along Willamette. The meeting focused exclusively on Willamette Street, current commercial area, going over the new setbacks and giving examples of business makeovers with new design features. In the new mixed-use area, it showed examples with the upper floors with large residential areas, although there's no required residential units for mixed use. However, my main point is the business owners and other people directly on Willamette Street had special mailings and surveys, door-to-door canvassing. Why was the same courtesy not done for the non-Willamette Street residents that are in the special area zone, some of whom you are rezoning their houses to apartment and condominiums up to 7 stories? So the city has gotten Willamette Street business owners and certainly Cascade Manor involved in the project early on. You've done a great job in getting the community activists involved, most of whom live on the other side of College Hill or other places nowhere near the affected areas. But you did not get the actual residents involved, which is why there are so many people, the actual residents, upset. Bill Randall of the Planning Commission at the City Club Forum seemed to think that notices in the Neighborhood Association newsletters and the Register Guard should have been enough, but it was not. That's why I, along with a lot of other people, are asking to suspend the South Willamette area zone adoption process and do further study involving all of the stakeholders, including the residents. Thanks.
Margie James is next, followed by Ralph MacDonald.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Margot James. I live in Ward 2 down on the 2800 block of Mill. I have great concerns around communication for this South Willamette area rezoning. There's been back and forth about who received what when and who sent what when. And it seems to me, based on the South Willamette Neighbors survey, that overwhelmingly the comments were people not knowing about this planning process. Because of the proposed zone changes in the South Willamette area, they largely affect residential properties and neighborhoods that are fully occupied, are affordable, are well established and livable. Because the city does not have experience with zone changes of this magnitude in established neighborhoods, and because 29th and Willamette Streets serve residents to the south and to the west of the area and to all city residents that shop businesses in this area, it seems to me the burden of reaching out needed to be by the city in multitudes of ways and multitudes of verbiage. Notifications I received contained buzzwords that I don't know what they mean. I'm not into planning. I'm not active that way. And I think a lot of people whose lives don't normally intersect policy and politics, they go to work, they have their family, they're involved in the community in other ways, they might not even have known that they probably should have checked deeper into what this meant. And I never received a notice that just said, you know, we're going to be changing the zoning in your neighborhood. You might, you know, we invite you to come join us, and something very clear and very concise. Because of the major change these proposals bring to those that have chosen to live and invest in their homes and neighborhoods that lie within the proposed zone, as each of you have done in your chosen neighborhoods, the city needs to acknowledge the need for greater sensitivity because of the impact of people's lives, to be clear and concise with message, and provide notification to a larger audience, perhaps, in ways that are not the norm. The city should also have wondered why there were so few individual residents involved in a planning process that was so intimately affecting them. There was a breakdown in communication for this plan, and because it is a template for one type of zoning in our city, this needs to be, it needs to be correct the first time. This needs to be a truly collaborative plan in order to be successful. I hope the City Council will vote to suspend this rezoning plan for South Willamette, and together let's create a model that works for the future while respecting the present.
Thank you. Ralph MacDonald was next, followed by Mary Ellen Larson.
Hi, I'm Ralph MacDonald, and I live at 55 Prawl Lane. That's in Ward 2, served by the very able City Councilor Betty Taylor, whom I hope runs for re-election. I'm sure she'll have good support. I'm a former member, board member of the Sierra Club Many Rivers Group, and consider myself an environmentalist. And I've lived at 55 Prawl Lane for about 30 years and in Eugene for 46 years. I raised 3 grown daughters here, and I think Eugene has a wonderful environment. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. Since I became active with South Willamette Neighbors, our neighborhood group that has concerns about this rezoning proposal, I've talked to some 200 neighbors. I've gone door to door. And many on Willamette or 29th Street are renters, and they don't know much about the proposal, but they're very concerned about what their landlord would think. But many others are, to my surprise, Republicans. And they're very nice people, and several have joined our organization. So maybe demographically we have a progressive area, but it's amazing to me that this is not an ideological issue. This is an issue that crosses ideological lines. We have active Republicans. Scott Landfield, owner of Tsunami Books, tells me that one of the more conservative members of the city councilor is a very good person and will listen to us. We've talked to many of the city councilors individually, and we hope to be able to meet with you all on this issue. I think that why is it an issue that crosses demographic lines? Because one's home is very important in all respects. Not only the home that has a contract and you're making your payments on it, but your yard, your mature trees, your garden. All of these things are things that should be protected, and they're values that perhaps we who see the good reasons for increased density and infill, we see that side of it, but it doesn't make sense to tear down perfectly good houses and rezone them when the house next door might be a person who doesn't want that. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mary Ellen Larson is next, followed by Richard Sunt.
Good evening. My name is Mary Ellen Larson. I live at 38 West 30th Avenue in Eugene, and I have lived there for the past 15 years. My husband Bob and I have planned on living our lives out in this great neighborhood, and we have invested much in our property, including building a cottage which provides monthly income in our retirement years. And now we are faced with Cascade Manor building 5 to 7 story apartments directly across the street from us. And I say, why force this kind of density into our already thriving neighborhood? And I ask that this massive rezoning, be stopped and to consider the human element first and the financial element second. And I thank you all for having this forum available and for your listening.
Richard Sunt is next, followed by Karen Leeson.
My name is Richard Sunt. I'm in Ward 2. I'm a retired professor and specializing in Gothic architecture, and I look at Gothic cathedrals quite a lot. I'm speaking about South Willamette again. From the outdoor cafe at Market of Choice, I can see the mature residential forest rising above Cascade Manor's new addition. Under the South Willamette concept plan, about 1/3 of this area would be stripped of its trees for apartments and condos. It's ironic that one of the plan's purposes is to preserve farmlands and woodlands, yet under the plan, the urban forest is to be sacrificed for housing. So much for Eugene's motto, a great city for the arts and outdoors, which I found on in Wikipedia. From Market of Choice, I can also see Mount Baldy and the hills of the Ridgeline Trail system. Under the concept plan, the 5-story buildings along Willamette will block all sight of the nearby natural landscape. We should not be fooled into believing that structures with step backs will ensure open views. Step backs only work when you are close to the buildings. From across the street and further away, their full 5 stories become visible. Planners have kept their eyes too closed on their drawing boards and computer screens. They have not ventured often enough outside to consider how South Willamette undulates, how it rises up after 29th, and how proposed buildings will fit and interact in this varied setting. With its rolling terrain and much wood, South Willamette is unlike most other parts of Eugene, and few cities anywhere have along the borders a hilly natural landscape or trail running for 5 miles. So save the plan and envision Eugene for the central part of town, where parking lots create gaping holes and low buildings are still the norm. For the south of town, a more appropriate plan would be embrace Eugene. Yes, embrace the natural beauties and the unique characteristics. Let's not cover up our assets, as we did years ago when we gave a precious river and frontage to create the Valley River parking lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen Leeson is next, followed by Harold Leeson.
Good evening. I'm going to start my piece and I'm going to let my husband finish it. My name is Karen Leeson. My husband and I have owned our home at 31st and Portland Street since 1989. We live and vote in Betty Taylor's ward. I would like to thank the council for this opportunity to address them on the South Willamette Special Area Zoning proposal. I first heard about this proposal in May of this year when I received a notice of public hearing from the Eugene Planning Commission inviting me to submit testimony June 2nd on what turned out to be 83 pages of a very complex rezoning redevelopment plan slated just outside my door. I have a master's degree from the University of Oregon, but would not consider myself savvy in city government or city planning, and the legalese of the notice provided me very little to go on. In point of fact, the notice said, and I quote, "Failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to afford the decision makers and the parties involved an opportunity to respond precludes appeal to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals. All decisions of elected officials are final. At the public hearing, testimony will first be accepted from those in support, then from those that are neutral, then from those in opposition, end quote. And to top it off, testimony was going to be timed. I could see I was already at the low end of the proverbial totem pole. Finding like-minded neighbors concerned about this zoning proposal, I began to become informed. As a homeowner, I believe the wholesale zoning change of 474 properties in Swazi circumvents current R1 zoning rules and procedures, opens the door to unmitigated development in a way that was not foreseen when we invested in an established R1 low-density neighborhood on South Willamette, and takes away many rights of property owners, including due process to rezoning. Thank you, and I'll let my husband finish.
Thank you. That must be Harold. And that he's followed by Vic Harriton.
Thank you for listening. My name is Harold Leeson. I'm in the infamous Betty Taylor's ward. I live on 3164 Portland Street. I live in a great neighborhood. I know all my neighbors. It's a real mix. We've got a halfway house at the end of the street. We have retired professors. We have runners across the street. It's a great neighborhood. When we bought our home, our purchase was predicated on R1 low-density neighborhood with open space and an interesting variety of homes. The neighborhood has an eclectic feel and affordability we wanted, and zoning rules which have been in place for years to protect our investment and the livability of our neighborhood. Yes, things could change and individual properties may ask to be rezoned in our area. Residents would be notified and could examine them on their own individual merit one at a time. This complex plan, with its bulk zoning change over 470 properties in one fell swoop, which results in high-density tall buildings and disregards traffic and parking issues, is the wrong interface with our mature established R1 neighborhood, and any pretext of widespread public involvement is misleading. We hear only about benefits to future residents and nothing about how Swazi would affect current residents. The proposed building heights, increased densities, and changes in use will fundamentally change the neighborhood I live in. Zoning is meant to protect people from just this kind of assault. It is wrong that R1 low-density zoning we purchased our home under can be swept away by a few votes of elected officials who should be protecting our property rights, not changing the rules in midstream. I am opposed to the bulk zoning changes of the South Willamette Special Area Zoning Proposal and respectfully request the council withdraw it.
Thank you.
Oh, did I say I live in a great neighborhood?
Yeah, I think you did. Twice. Vic Harriton is next, followed by Christine Sunt.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to, and all of us to speak to y'all.
You have to get that mic right up close to.
Oh, am I? Is this better?
That's better.
Okay. My name is Vic Harriton. I live on Fullview Drive. I'm a fairly new resident to Eugene. Love it here. Love my neighborhood. I'm in Miss Betty Taylor's ward. I've recently been appointed to the Sheena board. I'm a very civic-minded person. I like getting involved everywhere. I'm actually going to run for the co-chair at Sheena. With that said, I'm not here for Sheena. I'm here as a concerned citizen. You've been hearing from my neighbors, and no doubt will be hearing from many more, as the problem surrounding the South Willamette rezoning plan continues. One of the reasons this is bringing so many people who oppose this rezoning at quote-unquote 11th hour has been the ineffective communication that has been used. You have heard this before. I mean, we had only 500 feet of the first notice was given out. Those people who showed up or showed interest in some manner got a second notice, which might be only 10 people. Definitely not effective. Neighborhood associations have not been properly either informed or didn't have the tools to get it to their constituents underneath them. That communication code needs to be modified to provide a much larger area, not just 500 feet. Also, the neighborhood associations bordering on a change in zoning, if it's just across the street, should also be included in all of the rezoning change plans. So again, communication, as others have stated as well, has been a severe problem throughout. And it's not just South Eugene. It seems to be throughout Eugene. So I'd like to address that piece right now. I will be participating, hopefully, in the Neighborhood Leaders Council, with one of my intentions being to find a resolution to the communication problem. I've spoken with some of the city staff and hope to continue towards making this an acceptable, communication. I ask that you keep the record open until the spring of 2016 to allow the neighborhood association or associations and community to better understand the impact on them and their individual and neighborhood investment. We have heard on previous sessions that there is no need to hurry this rezoning. It will impact how development will be done over the next 20 years. Let's do it right with proper neighbor consideration. It is, after all, these neighbors' investment now and in the future. It is their backyards, their trees, their views, their streets. Let's work together. And I will help any way I can.
Thank you. Christine Sunt is next, followed by Dennis Clay.
Good evening, and thank you very much for this opportunity to address the City Council. I am Christine Sunt. I live at 20 West 31st Avenue. I vote in Betty Taylor's ward. Density and redevelopment, the aims of the proposed South Climate Plan, for whose benefit? With density as the goal and redevelopment as the tool, I wonder about the real winners and losers. The city speculates about density in the South Willamette Plan's FAQ, saying, quote, if City Council voted to implement economic incentives such as the MUPD program, it would raise the number of housing units to 250 in 20 years, unquote. Yikes, 20 years of MUPD. Is density so desirable that it warrants giving away taxpayer money for 2 more decades? Whatever happened to normal, unstimulated growth and stability? Something unlike a cancer cell gone wild. The true beneficiaries of the South Willamette Plan appear to be developers and investors who gain the most from density and redevelopment. For the record, area residents are not the cause of sprawl, nor should they be penalized for protecting their properties. We are not selfish in owning and upkeeping a modest house close into the city. We treasure our single-family properties with a backyard, garden spots, and sunshine. The city may have gotten the go-ahead from businesses and developers for the plan, but surveyed residents said they are strongly opposed. I asked the City Council to wait for a proper and legal refinement plan with full community engagement and impact studies before voting, because the pilot plan potentially harms all Eugenians for the next 20 years. And I want to point out in the handout that I have given to the clerk at the desk, there's a survey report on the back. Please have a look to see the pulse of our neighborhood in terms of what most of us feel about the plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dennis Clay is next, followed by Alisa Mommy.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Manager. My name is Dennis Clay. I'm in Betty Taylor's ward, and I've lived in right next door to Cascade Manor for about 30 years to the west. The only impact this is going to have on that house is failures in traffic, I believe, as we close down Willamette and add more people using the street with less lanes to navigate. But I have a house over on Portland, and as I've looked at the plan regarding Willamette and little commercial downstairs areas with seating and gardens and walkways and setback residences above, it sounds pretty cool. It sounds very Euro. And then when you cross south of 29th, according to the map, suddenly it all changes. Whereas on Willamette, we have setbacks, and houses that were R1 are now having R1 option. My house will be zoned multiple use. Everything around it will be multiple use, most of which the property has been bought by Cascade Manor. And I stand to have a 5-story building to the south of me, a 5-story building to the west of me, and a 7-story building to the north of me. And without any R1 zoning, there are no setbacks. I can find myself in a tube, basically 5 to 7 stories high. Across the street, where I'll have a little bit of sunshine, will be another 5-story. No more yard, no more sunshine. I urge you to withdraw this plan and let us as neighbors and members of the community help you come up with a plan that works for everyone, including the new folks that will be moving to Eugene. Our neighborhood is mixed use. We have had a lot of affordable housing, duplexes. Cascade Manor has bulldozed most of those on the west side of Portland. And they have more that they are using for storage, and then as soon as they probably get a hold of my property and another one, they'll be ready to complete their acquisition of the block. So please consider the impact on the people that live in this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Alisa Mommy, followed by Willie Meeks.
Good evening. My name is Alisa Mommy, and 941 Willamette Street, Eugene, downtown. My family owns 2
Pull
properties.
that just a little closer to you.
My family is good. Owns 2 properties of 20 East Broadway and 941 Willamette Street, which both have common walls with Kinkisi Plaza or Square. I submitted to the city in 95, 96, and 2004 proposals regarding the openings and penetrations through the walls of the plaza and having storefronts and businesses all around the plaza from both east walls and the south walls. The city manager at the time, Mr. Dennis Taylor, in a letter on September 22, 2004, indicated the city's willingness to work with us and on an agreement to penetrate through those walls and establish those businesses and use the public space. However, such permit was a irrevocable permit, and it didn't make sense for us to invest so much money and one day somebody comes and revoke that permit from us. Recently, I was informed that the city again is considering the revitalizations of the plaza and even considering the sales of that space and putting some apartments, but some private investors. I'm here to request to be involved in this process because I have immediate interest in that area and follow up on our original proposals with regard to creating activities in that space, keep that public, or give us some private autonomy so we can make it a better place, a cultural center for the city. We are there for about 28 years, and we have seen all kinds of activities there since those streets were closed and then they opened. Always that plaza was a concern of mine, and that's the reason that we bought, those properties, hopefully with the hope that one day we can do something there. And I appreciate for your considerations, and thank you for giving me the time to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Willie Mims is next, followed by Donald Driscoll.
You're not seeing double.
My name is Willie Mims. I live at 2767 Harris. On behalf of myself and my wife, Sally Mims, we're seeking to continue and finish the secondary dwelling unit behind our primary dwelling at 2767 Harris Street. Over 20 years ago, we made a decision to invest in our home property as our retirement strategy. We're not asking, nor is very need, to change the size or the appearance of the existing accessory building. We only need to be permitted to use it for the purpose for which it was originally built. It would provide the financial security needed for us to be able to age in place in a home that we have lived in for 40 years. We used our personal funds to initiate this project. We hired on Thanks Waterbury Architects to draw plans for a secondary dwelling. The final plans were submitted and approved by the city. The initial construction of the foundation, structure, rough electrical and plumbing was completed, inspected, and approved by the city. During this work period, the U.S. West began relocating its business office outside Eugene, resulting in a job loss for Sally. This suddenly meant we did not have the combined income to complete the job or qualify for finances to complete the job. Over the last 20 years, as finances allowed and time permitted, we worked towards completing our retirement dream. Last year, when we were in position and in the process to finish by using our IRA money, we were instructed by a code compliance inspector to acquire a change of use permit. Doing so, we were told by the city planning department staff that we can't finish the project because a conflict with codes recently passed for our district. Even so, we believe we should have been allowed to finish what had previously been accepted and approved. We are told by staff that isn't possible, as well as that there was no way for us to redress the issue. The staff said they have no copies of the submitted blueprints, but we have copies of the architect preliminary plans showing the original intent was to use the structure as a secondary living unit. Records will also show that we have been taxed for it as a living unit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Donald Driscoll is next, followed by Mariah Kanchan.
Is this one working? Sounds like it. Mayor Piercy, members of the City Council, my name's Don Driscoll. I'm an architect and community planner, and I'm here to ask your help this evening, basically. We'd like you to ask the Planning Commission to consider pre-existent circumstances relative to the MIMS circumstances that you've just heard about, and also other people in the same situation. The MIMS have lived in Eugene for 40 years. The issue here is that they had completed work on most of a secondary dwelling unit in 1995. City permits were issued in 1997 and 2001. The existing building has been on the property for 20 years. Zoning at construction was R3 multiple family, allowing secondary dwellings. What happened in the meantime, however, that code changes have happened since that time, that has excluded them from continuing development on their particular building, even though it's partially done already. Completion of the secondary unit development has been a staged process out of necessity. These are retired owners. Money's a little short now and then, and so they've been piecing away at it over the years to build it. Now that they can finally complete the internal structure, the building's been there for 20 years, to complete the internal portion of it, the Planning Commission has denied them that opportunity to do that. And so basically what we're asking this evening, I think, requested action, is to direct the Planning Department to seek a solution for the MIMS dilemma. And it's not just their dilemma. I think other people would have exactly the same circumstances. There are procedures that can be utilized to address unusual circumstances like this. Variances, appeals are often used together with interpretation of standards for pre-existing structures. What I'm getting at is the opportunity is there for the Planning Department to really make a decision in their favor. What has happened is when they walk in there is that they look at the code and they say, nope, you don't meet the code standard. I'm sorry, goodbye. That doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. It would make a lot more sense if a planning department would sit down with them and say, well, let's look at this. There might be a way. There was no suggestion of help. I went to the planning department after the MIMS had been there and tried to seek it out myself. And again, I got the same answer from the planning department. Ironically, from the building department, I had very good reaction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mariah Roth is up next, followed by Michael Kerrigan.
Good evening, Mayor Piercy, City Council, City Manager, and all of the folks behind me. My name is Mariah Kanchan Roth, and I live at 3322 Vadera Drive in the southwest part of town. So Mr. Pryor is my person on the City Council. And I'm here just to speak briefly, and I'm going to beat the red light. And I'm just going to read a few excerpts from the Register Guard commentary section that was published on Sunday, October 4th, 2015. And the title of the article, which I'm sure most of you have seen and read and studied, is "Homelessness is Not a Crime." Repetition for emphasis. Homelessness is not a crime. Subtitle: Eugene can take steps now to seek solutions, not prosecutions. Written by Ken Neubeck, local journalist par excellence, I imagine. So a few excerpts. In the words of Sir Nigel Rodley, chairman of the UN, United Nations Human Rights Committee, I'm simply baffled by the idea that people can be without shelter in a country and then be treated as criminals because they are without shelter. Excerpt number 2. Finally, the Obama administration is responding. The U.S. Department of Justice has issued a statement of interest in a lawsuit against a camping ban. A camping ban, imagine that. Sorry, I interjected that. In Boise, Idaho. The statement calls bans on camping in public when insufficient numbers of shelter beds are available a violation of the 8th Amendment to the Constitution, which bans cruel and unusual punishment. Third excerpt. Criminalization of homelessness is a civil and human rights issue to which city officials must drop its resistance or suffer the legal and financial consequences. Fourth excerpt. As Pope Francis said at New York City's St. Patrick Church on September 24th, quote, "We can find no social or moral justification, no justification whatsoever for lack of housing." A fifth and final excerpt. Affordable permanent housing is the... Oh, I didn't beat it, but I got close. Thank you. Thank you for the work you've done thus far, and I hope to participate in the process and help solve this problem.
Thank you. Michael Kerrigan is next, followed by Linda Liu.
Good evening. My name is Michael Kerrigan. I live in a great neighborhood in Ward 7. I'm the program director at Community Alliance in Lane County, or CALP. I'm also on the board of Opportunity Village Eugene and the Nightingale Health Sanctuary. I'm here tonight to give you a positive story, something that's really great that's happened in our wonderful neighborhood. As part of the car camping program, CALP participates in that. A guy named Roger Coffey, Kitty knows Roger, has been part of that program for about 2 years. And Roger really would have wanted to find an apartment, but as a single guy, older single guy, it was just almost impossible for him to do so. But fortunately, when the city and St. Vinny's and others collaborated on a program helping homeless vets, Roger is a Vietnam vet, a homeless vet. And because the program had staff there to advocate for people, a friend of mine, Reagan, he was able to find a place for Roger to live. So the apartment complex next door to Calc, Roger's going to be moving in there probably in 1 month. He's thrilled. He's just like so happy he gets to have his place. And the reason that succeeded is because of collaboration and because of increased funding. More resources were put in that program. Calc is part of the car camping program. We've had folks back there, but St. Vinny's doesn't have the resources to advocate for folks in that program. So I'm here today to really encourage you to increase funding for a variety of programs this upcoming winter. For example, increase sites for the car camping program. We've helped quite a few people. A homeless woman named Sharon just kind of walked in last week. We happened to have a little trailer that some previous folks had left. She couldn't go to St. Vinny's because she smokes pot. She didn't know what to do, but we had a place for her. There's more places like that throughout the community. Places like Calc, other parking lots throughout the city. We also, next door where we live, Kitty, there's also a RV with a homeless family in the driveway next door to us. That's great. More of that. Things can work. Things are working. But I think in the winter ahead, winter's coming. We know that. So we're really urging you to schedule a work session coming up that Councilor Evans has requested to talk about the decriminalization of homelessness, but also how to identify how we as not just you, but how we as a city can do more to help the unhoused. So thank you for the time to speak tonight.
Thank you. Linda Liu is next. Hi.
My name is Linda Liu. I live in Ward 2. No, I live in Ward 3 with Alan. I spent more time preparing these packets for you city councilors and mayor than I did in preparing anything to say. I have stayed home and watched for weeks at the public hearing all the all the climate information and people being so concerned about carbon and climate, and I hear many, many bright people and concerned young people talk about this climate initiative, which I counter. I don't hear anybody talk about geoengineering and chemtrails. Of course, today, there aren't any chemtrails or geoengineering. I made these signs that I would like to loan to the city for the next month. I'd like them put in city and public areas. I have in my packet, I have given each of you an independent Thinker's chemtrail fact sheet. There's websites on the back. This is a very big story and a very big agenda that we are countering from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I don't know if any of you have heard of Agenda 21, which is a lot of the problems we're having with our zoning. It's another conversation. But I ran into Tom Bowerman about a year ago, and I learned about Policy Interactive, and so I started researching it, and I put a lot of that information in your packets as well as other information, CDs, DVDs on climate, geoengineering and climate change. They had a large conference down in Redding, California, August 14th. 1,000 people were there, scientists, biologists. It's very important. You can go to geoengineeringwatch.org and see the whole thing. This is serious. What Interactive Policy Committee is about, run by Tom Bowerman, with policy advisors Floyd Przansky, Phil Barnhart, Pete Sorensen, Bill Bradbury, Kate Brown. They are very interested on global climate change, but when I tried to talk to Tom about geoengineering a year ago, he did not want to hear it. And then I realized that he created this House Bill 3470A, and the information in it comes from 2007. ClimateGate happened in 2009, which, as you know, exposed a lot of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for false science. There are 33,000 scientists around the world who are challenging the IPCC. I want us to be an informed community. Eugene thinks it is so progressive, and we're only getting one side of the story.
Thank you.
So I have packets that I'm leaving.
Just to give them to them.
Yes.
And I'm going to close the public forum and thank everybody for coming. It's obvious that the folks who came tonight to talk about the zoning of the Willamette area care a great deal about their homes, and I appreciate very much the way you talk to us. And for the new person who's come to Eugene, we welcome you and we thank you for getting involved in your neighborhood. Chris, you're next.
Thank you. I also appreciate everybody who came to speak tonight. It's always very helpful when you come and present your perspective. With regard to the South Hills folks, I've actually driven through that neighborhood a number of times and seen exactly what you're talking about. I've also met with city staff. I'm going to be meeting with members of the Planning Commission. I want a whole lot more information about what's going on there to really be as informed as I can be on the issue. I don't want to act rashly or without great thought, so the more information I have, the better, and that includes your perspectives as well. With regard to Willie Mim's situation, a couple of questions I would have. One is, this situation is in any way related to the R1 code amendments that we passed recently? I believe it is. And so the R1 code amendments are what have put this situation forward. I don't know what our legal authority or ability is to waive those. I don't think it's possible for a city council to just say, we're going to waive the amendments on a case-by-case basis, but I would like to know what our recourse is, what we can do. I think it's an unfortunate situation. I'd like to see if we can figure out something to do, not just with Mr. Mim's case, but I would suspect there are other cases like this. I've heard rumblings that other folks have run into similar problems, whether it's with flag lots or secondary dwelling units or other kinds of situations that our recent passage of R1 code amendments is now affecting. So I'd like to get a sense of what our options are around that and what we might do to help alleviate. I've heard it could be a few hundred people who might be affected by this kind of thing citywide. So Mr. Mims, you might be the test case for what we might be able to do to alleviate a problem for a great many people, and I would like to find out what our options are.
And we'll provide, could be information on the specifics, but the more general conversation as well, we'll provide information.
Great. Thank you very much.
I've got Mike next, and then Claire, and then Betty.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate everybody coming tonight and everybody speaking. I want to say that to the people in the South Willamette Special Area Zone, I have tried for the nearly 9 years I've served on council to be a strong advocate for heritage neighborhood protection in our community, and this is not one of the cases where that's going to change for me. This is something important. I too have met with staff and talked about this. I don't know at this moment specifically the precise way in which we'll adjust what's been proposed, but I feel comfortable saying I think there's concern on part of majority of council to make sure that we make an adjustment that's right here to protect the area. So I'll look forward to finding the right way to do that with you. And I would say as a result of that, Councillor Brown and I and others did a lot of work around the idea when we had the R1 code amendments come before us with regard to what the staff proposed and how that affected secondary dwelling units and alley access lots and some of the things that were altered when we made that adjustment. We did that in the name of neighborhood protection because we didn't want to see inappropriate infill and development occur in some of those neighborhoods. But in this case, in my opinion, an injustice was created by that protection because other people had made plans playing by the rules. And so we have a duty to fix that, and I'm going to look forward to doing that. I heard the manager just tell Chris that you have plans to come back to us with action or with information. I want to make a motion on this, but I'm going to not do it tonight. But specifically, my problem and the reason we made the adjustments with the R1 was the city proposed something that was too broad with regard to the size of lots, with regard to some specific changes that applied to the rules for everybody and from this point forward. What I would want to adjust is making sure that our changing the rules in the middle of somebody else's game didn't create an injustice for them. So I would want to look very narrowly at those who had some manner of permit previously already approved by the city. They'd spent money specifically. They'd created, they'd begun to build things specifically and had to stop partway through because of our change. Those are the ones I'd like to come up with alternatives for how we deal with that, rather than go back through the old arguments of having this debate again. So I'm hoping we can keep that a very narrow bit of information.
I think it'll ultimately depend on where your discussion goes. What we will do is try to provide information, and then obviously you can choose to take whatever direction you'd like to take with that.
Thank you, City Manager. So I apologize to Councilor Pryor and Councilor Clark. I was still in my work session mode and was calling you by your first name. So I know. I apologize.
I still responded, though.
Yeah. You can call me anything you like. That's fine.
Thank you, Mayor. So I really do want to thank everyone who came to speak with us and for the many thoughtful comments and suggestions for improving public outreach and other comments. And thank you, Michael Kerrigan, for the story of our neighbor finding apartment in our neighborhood. That's pretty great. But I look forward to having more conversation about the Willamette Special Area Zone, so I'm not going to address that specifically. I just wanted to respond to one of the commenters, and I don't mean to pick on anyone, but the expression of almost surprise that there are good people who are conservative in the neighborhood. I just want to say, I go out on a limb here, all the councilors serving here are good people, as are our city planners and our planning commissioners. And I hope that no matter what position we individually might take on this issue or the many others that we grapple with as a council, that we wouldn't characterize characterizes anyone as a good or bad person based on their vote. We can disagree about the way forward without demonizing each other for having different views. So I just felt compelled to say that. Thanks.
All right. Councilor Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very concerned about the South Willamette. I couldn't help being concerned. I've heard so much about it. But I do think it's important that we give people a chance to participate after they become aware of what's happening. And many people have just become aware of what's planned for South Willamette, including me, the breadth of it. And they're very concerned. I think the least we can do is to postpone until next year, next calendar year, considering this. I have written to the mayor and the city manager asking if we can postpone our work session, our hearing, and our action. And I think there will need to be a lot of plans, a lot of changes to the plan. I'm really concerned about justice for anyone, and the people who bought houses considering being assured that they were in an R1 zone have a right to continue to expect that. And whether it's an individual or large group, South Willamette is a large and growing group, but Willie Nem's situation is something that we should be concerned about also. And I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but the owner of the rug company, I'll call him Ali, is that okay? I hope that the city manager will talk to him about Broadway Plaza before we do something else there. I think he has some plans that are long-standing also. So my question is, can we postpone? As I understand it, the manager and the mayor set the agenda, right?
Yes.
We can. So I wonder if we can postpone, if you will consider postponing consideration of the South Willamette zone, or if council would need a motion.
What I would recommend, we have a work session coming up early November on it.
I was hoping to postpone that.
What I was going to say is it might be an opportunity to actually just provide information so the council and anybody tuning in has a set of information. Again, people may or may not agree with it, but at least it's a set of information. And you would not have to act at that time on anything in particular, but it does provide an opportunity to everybody have the common set of information. And so I would recommend we continue with that particular work session. You may or may not choose to have a public hearing anytime immediately following that, but at least that's an opportunity to get common information.
That would be a time then to make a motion to postpone the public hearing.
What I think would ultimately happen is we generally ask you to take an affirmative to set a public hearing as opposed to necessarily needing an action to not have a public hearing. And so we can talk about it at that time, but ultimately the council can choose whether or not you want a public hearing and when you would like to have that.
Okay, thank you.
I just add to that I would see that as an opportunity to for the council to hear about those issues and that other people are hearing about, and an opportunity for you all to continue to weigh in. So we'll just figure out how we keep moving forward with it, but we'll do it in a thoughtful way. I've got Councilor Lincoln and Councilor Brown.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. Thanks to Mike Carrigan for the positive story about a homeless person having a good ending. Mr. Nims, I think that, Ms. Nims, I think that the more unique your story is, the better you're off in that case. It's easier to deal with that way. On South Willamette, I've been listening and hearing and talking to people. I went to the meeting at Good Samaritan where we sang Happy Birthday to Betty. And And I, too, am concerned about neighborhood livability. In fact, that was one of the three pillars of my original campaign literature when I ran for city council, and still is. And I've gone through similar fights in my neighborhood where R1 and R4 were smacked up against each other. One of the few places in the city where that actually occurred, and we managed to deal with those things very effectively. And some of those lessons learned are being applied to the South Willamette plan. But I think they may have gone a little bit too far in where and how it was applied. And I'm meeting with staff, actually I think tomorrow or Wednesday, and talk about adjustments to this plan. I think that needs to be done. But there still are some problems that need to be fixed in that area, and some density that needs to be incorporated in that. For instance, right now, today, or tomorrow, someone could propose a 120-foot building on Willamette, all the way up and down both sides of Willamette. That's perfectly legal right now in the zoning. That, I think, is inappropriate. And, for instance, and this plan does handle some of that. So that's absolutely the case right now. So bringing that back down to 5 and stair-stepping it away is one of the lessons we learned in my neighborhood with the Joe Romania lot and the area just south of Willamette on 19th. And both of those fixes are in place today. So there are other parts of this plan that are a bit more problematic for me that I think need to be adjusted. But there are some things that are in that core area that I think everybody can agree on that need to be changed.
Councilor Brown?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming down. I really appreciate hearing your viewpoints. I'm wondering, Mr. Amani, maybe you could send the council and perhaps manager what you just said tonight, kind of an outline of what the history of the property is and your efforts before to redesign it and the conditional approval. Yeah, that would be helpful. And Mr. Nem, is your property is that in the South University neighborhood?
Yes.
Okay. Well, my memory, if my memory serves me right, yes, thank you.
It's in the Amazon neighborhood.
Yeah, that was the area that was covered by the interim protections that council amended and passed, and I surely believe there must be a way to. I have another question for you. Have any of your neighbors complained about the structure that is my understanding is it's a framed building, and does it have a roof?
We handed in a package for each one of you. Part of that package we went around to each neighbor in our neighborhood who's living, and they all support our idea.
Okay. Well, I apologize. I haven't read that material. I was out of town, and so I will get caught up. Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I have a feeling we can, by putting our heads together, and we'll figure something out. Hopefully that will have a good conclusion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And now we're going to move on, and we are going to have action item 3, which is the appointment to the Sustainability Commission. Council President?
So before I make a motion, I just want to say, as has happened in the past, we had many, many qualified applicants to the Sustainability Commission and interviewed a number of those, and I just want to make that clear that we have many interested and skilled and dedicated citizens who want to volunteer with the community. And I know sometimes when people don't get appointed, their feelings can be hurt or they wonder why they weren't appointed. And I just want to express that we have a lot of people who want to participate. And so it is competitive to get appointed to one of our commissions. So with that said, I move to appoint Thomas Pettis Czar to position 2 on the Sustainability Commission, an unexpired term ending on June 30, 2017.
Second.
Moved in.
She seconded.
Okay. Usually it would be.
It's the senior member.
That's because we don't have Greg. Sorry. Okay. I'm slow. All right. It's okay. Moved and seconded, and now we're ready. A discussion? Councilor Zelenka.
It's not about Thomas, but it is about the outgoing person who's actually in the audience. It was Sasha Leftick, who actually went on to work at LTD on the next item. And so that's why this vacancy is, and Sasha did a great job. Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you. All right, I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 7. None in opposition. That passes. Thank you and congratulations. Next item up is the moving ahead corridor screening. City Manager, do you have any comments you want to make before we put that out there?
I can, or if you want to. Okay, I can just do it real quickly. Your action this evening on the moving ahead corridor screening is a follow-up to the joint work session that you held with Lane Transit District Board of Directors on September 28th. You have my recommendation and a suggested motion before you to advance transportation corridors for further study as MX alternatives, enhanced corridor alternatives, and no-build alternatives. Has been the case throughout the moving ahead process, the project team has been engaging the community to identify and consider improvements for people riding the bus, walking, biking, and rolling with a mobility device, and to create a safe and accessible transportation system. And City and LTD staff are here to answer questions that you may have.
Thank you. One for the motion on the table.
I move to direct the city manager to advance the following moving ahead corridors for further study, to evaluate an MX alternative, an enhanced corridor alternative, and a no-build alternative during the Level 2 alternatives analysis for Highway 99 corridor, River Road corridor, Coburg Road corridor, 30th Avenue Lane Community College corridor, and direct the city manager to advance the Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard corridor as an enhanced corridor as part of the Level 2 alternatives analysis.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and vote in favor of this because having more information and studying things is almost always a good thing, so we have more specifics to talk about. But I will say again, as I said in the work session the other day, that I'm extremely concerned with the idea of the addition of the Coburg corridor. I know as an MX corridor, I know there are other pieces of this. I know it's important for us to develop the appropriate plans because obviously there's a public need. But I'm hopeful that we will study that one especially clearly and especially deeply with regard to mitigating impacts from excess congestion. So, thank you.
Councilor Polling and then Councilor Zelenka.
Thank you. Yes, I would just like to make it clear that this is just moving it for further study. I served on the Coburg Road Corridor stakeholders group starting in September 2002. Based on the guidelines that group was given by the city council at the time, it made it very difficult to study that corridor without coming up with one or two answers. Since that time, the city of Eugene as well as the LTD has come up with different, I guess you call it angles or views or different takes on how to develop a corridor. That's why I am agreeable to moving the Coburg Road corridor forward for an additional study, because we can add all those new things into the mix to come up with a solution or not. I mean, the no-build solution is still out there as an option. But I think with the development that has gone on in the north end of Coburg Road and the Crescent Chad Drive, and the redevelopment that's gone on in the south end of the Coburg Road, I think it's important that we do take a second look at that with the new guidelines that we're following, not only because of that, but also because of the EMX route that takes in the North Springfield area of the hospitals, now with all the development, including the VA hospital on Chad. So that's one of the reasons why I am voting in favor of this, to move it forward.
Thank you. Councilor Zelenka.
Yeah, two couple things. One is I served on the steering committee of this group along with Councilor Evans, and we looked at each one of these corridors and the ones we took out in a lot of detail and forwarded these 4 plus the Martin Luther King as an enhanced corridor, in part because we've been taking on average 9 years per corridor to plan one of these things, and the FTA said that there are people that do light rail faster than that, and so moving ahead on multiple corridors to study them in more detail felt made a lot of sense to move this process along in a more expedited fashion while still doing good planning. And it's not that these are all cookie cutter, they're not all the same even. For instance, there's different applications of different types of the system within a corridor. For instance, most of the Coburg Road is actually in traffic with other parts being in dedicated lanes. So it's not, they're all unique and they all have their own study that needs to occur for each of them to move forward, or not.
I would just add to that, one of the issues is trying to build the system more completely so that we really see the promise of the whole system. And it's also I forget what the rest of the thing I was going to say. The whole system will work and function better when we are connecting these things. And what I was going to say is the other issue for us, honestly, is if it takes 9 years, some of the people who understood why you were doing it are no longer are not here anymore, and new people have come and they don't, and so you have to kind of resell it every time, which is not helpful to building that system. So I think it works in our interest, both financially and in terms of the community, to try to get this thing moving more robustly together. All right, I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor, please indicate. 7 in favor, and none in opposition. It passes. Thank you, and that's the end of business for today. Another one down.